Greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is probably not going to be another Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies. Made a long video here yesterday, and a long video yesterday I've made on my other channel that I'm going to make public today. It was for members only yesterday. As it stands right now, they're both monetized. I guess YouTube is wanting people to talk about what's going on there, the crisis in Palestine. And so there are things that happen, issues that happen that sort of hijack my show. Like it gets me away from doing what I normally would do. And this is, it's because of their importance and whatever's going on. And usually I want to move on from it early on. I mean, you guys have seen this happen to me before where like I talk about something, sometimes celebrity, sometimes it's, whatever it is. And I think it's going to be one or maybe two videos, follow-up videos, but people leave comments and then more news breaks or whatever. It's an ongoing story. And, I get bored with it or whatever. I get, ready to move on. And people move on and they, the story breaks and they have interest in it and then they move on. So there isn't like as many views as you go down the line. But I have to stick with it because there's more that has to be said, right? It's not complete. Like you have to finish the thing. It has to be, there has to be some sort of resolution in the videos that I make. And I would say this thing that's happened in Palestine, the thing with Israel and Palestine, it reminds me of the way I felt about Libya. Like the Libya thing really bugged me. The way that America and the United Nations destroyed Gaddafi. And I at that time I had covered things like that, but after they had happened. But it was happening real time when I was aware of the UN, like in a way that it was, there was stuff that was going on in the Sajmarg mission with it becoming an NGO. So I was researching the UN at that time, and then all the things to do with wars. Like it was a time where I was doing a lot of research about this type of behavior, lying about regime change, wanting to do regime change in Libya. And I was aware of these deceptions and things in a way that, it was just hitting at the right time. Because, you become aware of something, then you forget a lot of what happens in it, right? Like I don't remember all the things that I cover, but I remember, patterns of behavior and, I can call up some memories on something. But there are times where you're just in it, right? And I was already in it with the UN, and I was already in it with these, type of bogus wars. And then the thing with Libya happened, and there was a young English reporter, a young woman, who had been in Libya for years, and she gave this tearful, these tearful accounts. Her name was like Lizzie Fallon or something like this, Fallon. And she knew it was complete BS. And she was just somebody that you would believe, that she had been in Libya for a number of years and she couldn't believe it, what was happening to them. And, so this thing that happened back then and just, all the things that are happening now and the prophecies that exist in the Sajmark system about nuclear war and the timetable for that is kind of, I don't want to say surreal, but it's like there's something there. And it bothers me what's happening because of the lies. I turned on the news yesterday more than I usually do. And I was just watching them milk the victim consciousness, right? Create victim consciousness. And, all the things I've said about it. I've covered out that twice. The video that I'm releasing today on my other channel, my normal channel, Talk is the Future, is going to center around victim consciousness and all its forms, and then all the stuff to do with religions and using victim consciousness and all these things as well. Another long video. And today I got two things of Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis was on CNN this morning, and he was on Morning Joe yesterday. And he sucks. Like, he just sucks. And he's just, drinking the Kool-Aid here, like all these clowns. And, he's kind of trying to go all in. Like, he's trying to be more pro-Israel. They're all trying to out-pro-Israel each other, right? Like, with no sense of any obligation to look at the other side, look at the other position, which I'll get into. Like, there is a conflict here. In any war, there's a conflict, and you can just say the other side's evil. Like that's the position that people want to take. Oh, the other side's just evil. The reason they're doing things, they're evil. Why are they doing what they're doing? Oh, because they're evil. Are they evil by nature? No, just evil. No reason to talk about that. No reason to ask any further questions. They're just evil. The Palestinians are evil. Muslim people, these things. That's the way their position is. Just to call somebody else evil, that's what they do to us all here. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist? You're just evil. And Ron DeSantis gets into the conspiracy theory stuff on CNN. But he got into Biden on Morning Joe. I haven't watched the video yet. But I knew I was going to have to cover it today just by, the title alone. And so to start off with, though, I got one comment yesterday I want to address here. And the person wrote this. You are usually pretty thorough. Now, people who comment regularly, they get some sort of a thing next to their name. So this is my video. Biden trumps at RFK take the Big Z pledge. You are usually pretty thorough. However, in this case, you are way off base. You mischaracterize the maps in the first 2 minutes of the video, and the history of the region begins before the mandate of Palestine. Was it rocks that killed all those people at the rave in Israel? The video is full of misinformation and half-truths. Please beware, and the beware is in capital letters. And you often get this when you comment about, you say something that people find negative towards Israel. There's some sort of implied threat. I've seen this with a number of comments, right? And so let's just go to the maps, first of all. So the person says, you mischaracterized the maps in the first 2 minutes of the video, and the history of the region begins before the mandate of Palestine. Okay, so the first thing here is that these are the maps that I use. This is the map I used here. We'll show you that in a moment. But there's so many of them, and they all are the same map, right? Now, there isn't a huge Palestinian presence, a pro-Palestinian lobby, and all the rest of it. So here it says, debunked Palestinian propaganda map, right? The Jerusalem Post. So this is an Israeli paper, the Jerusalem Post. Finnish matriculation exam used to debunk Palestinian map propaganda. The images of the 4 maps has been widely debunked as misleading and deceptive. Then why is it on Google, right? Okay, so this map that's out there, of course Israel doesn't want you to see this map. But Israel has much more control over the media. I mean, people are pro-Israel. Important people, media people. There are many people in the media who have prominent positions who are dual citizens or at least have Jewish heritage. And there's nobody that I know of who's pro-Palestine. I don't know any famous people other than, somebody like Waters from Pink Floyd, a few people like that. Like Palestinian, there's not many people who take the Palestinian cause. Not many celebrities, nobody in the media that I see, right? And so this is the map that's out there. And they're saying it's been debunked. Well, are you saying that Google is wrong? Because Google doesn't even call anything Palestine. So what I did was I searched here, Israeli-Palestine map. And this is what you get. This is the majority of people are saying this is what it looks like, right? And at one point it was all Palestine. Not that long ago. There was no Jewish state. There was no country in Israel that was called Israel in the recent history, and before 1945 or whatever it was, right? And there were some Jewish people there. We all heard about Kennedy's ridiculous take on this, but here's Google. They call it Israel now. It used to be called Palestine, but now it's called Israel. There's a little place here called the Gaza Strip, and there's a little place here called the West Bank, and everything else is Israel. And they don't even say this is Palestine. There's some area in here. The green is mountains. It's not like the other maps where the green represents Palestine. In this map, the green represents mountains. There's mountains in other countries here, right? Or whatever it is, forests or whatever it represents. for Google. But here's Israel, right? It's the big, they got some waterfront property here. They got most of the beachfront property here. Here's the big cities, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and these things. And Israel is dominant. It's the country called Israel. And when you search Palestine, there's no Palestine here on the map. So you're saying Google is somehow anti-Semitic, and what are you saying here? Like, you're saying that about Google Maps? I mean, Google Maps is saying there's no such thing as Palestine, right? Some of the negotiation was supposed to be about creating a Palestinian state, right? A state where Palestine would have their own lands, and that isn't happening. And so this area is not called Palestine on Google Maps, and the majority of this country is Israel. There's the small Gaza Strip, which is going to be, taken over. We know what's going to happen here. And, we'll see. Like in a month or so, when they redefine this in terms of the Gaza Strip is no longer going to be considered Palestinian, and maybe the West Bank too, we'll see what happens. But these maps are accurate. Based in everything, right? These maps are accurate because this is, the powers that be, Google is very friendly to Israel. There's no pro-Palestinian part of Google. If they're going to correct you, they're going to correct you about, how you're wrong about Israel. That's how Google and YouTube and all their associates, all the mainstream media, all the Facebook, all these places, if they're going to protect a group, Jewish people are a protected group on YouTube. So you're saying that they're lying about this? Like, what are you talking about? Right? That's the map. These are the maps here. They're all over the place. And again, I haven't been there. I don't, know all these things. But even if you've been there, you don't know what the map is. But we've seen it, right? The Palestinian people's lands has shrunk over the years, and this is what's there. And you can say it's a conspiracy theory, it's anti-Semitic, and it's just a way to attack Israel. But all the powers that be are on your side. All the powers that be. When I turn on the mainstream media, no one's talking about Palestine and any of the things to do with Palestine. They're talking about how Israel's being attacked and how we have to support Israel. And there's just degrees of that. There's nobody saying, oh, this is horrible for the Palestinian children. There's none of these things, right? This is just the Hamas is bad, and they've done this. They've done this to the Israeli people, and now Israel has a right to defend itself. That's the story you're getting from everybody. And so, come on, right? like this is what you're going to claim, right? This is, come on, this is a point where you have to be a human being and see that there's two sides of the story. There's, two sides to every story. And I understand the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. And Israel has all the power. And there are things that we're being lied to by mainstream media and things that are being covered up, like with all these other things. It's what I cover. And so you're on that side. Like, this is, it's clear what I cover here. And I always talk about how there's divine reasons for things happening, and it's all part of a plan. And I'm more generous than other people to the evil and the atrocities that are being done, because I think it's a, systemic issue, which I talk about extensively. But, I'm a fair and balanced person. And, why would all these maps be the same way? Why would Google's map be the same way when Google clearly is on the side of Israel and not on the side of the Palestinian people? So for whatever reason, MSNBC and CNN decided to have Ron DeSantis on. And he ends up talking about, well, it's just, I haven't seen it yet, but I know what's coming.
I want to expand a little bit on what you've said regarding Iran. Since 1979, they've been the epicenter of global terrorism. You talk about the Beirut bombing in 19...
Okay, so if you're going to be historical, like this person said, there's more to the story than I said in my video about a country called Palestine in the region. But if you're going to be like that, right, if you're going to go back in time, and this is not even going back in time that far, in 1963, there was Operation Ajax, where they deposed which I talked about in these other videos, right? The CIA got involved and they deposed a moderate politician, and they chose to, destroy this guy and, all the things that happened with that, right? Mossadegh, and install their own puppet leader, which created Iran the way it is now. We wronged the Iranian people. America, my country, and the CIA, which represents me and my country, right? All of us, it represents all of us, decided to destroy, what ultimately ended up being destroying a moderate democracy and turning into what it is now, right? And anything that happens there from there on, we have culpability, right? When you manipulate something, when you change something, when you interfere with somebody's sovereign government, which America has done over and over again, sometimes on the behest of Israel, or in this case of England and Israel, right? I mean, this was a region where all of the things that we do in that region are there for, in some part to do with our relationship with Israel, right? All the wars in that area, in Iraq, Libya, all these things that were done, we do what's best for Israel as part of it. Like that's, a known aspect. All these people say it. All these politicians say it again and again, how important the relationship is with Israel. And Ron, the sanctimonious, as Trump calls him, is going to try to out Zionist Trump and RFK Jr. and certainly Biden, right? But, there's a history here. And you can't pretend like that didn't happen, like we didn't wreck that country, because we did. So anytime you talk about Iran in a negative way, you have to point a finger at America and the CIA. You have to be fair. You have to say, yeah, we screwed that country up. Whatever they are now, whatever bad things they're doing now, whatever's happened there, has happened because we decided to interfere with something, and we caused what exists now as a government there.
1983, they have had American blood on their hands for a very long time now.
Like, again, trying to make America the victim. Look at this Gumby Joe MNFer with his small little tiny mouth and his angry dude here. There are a couple,
Whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's a Houthi rebels, whether it's Hamas, obviously, whether it's Islamic Jihad, but you also talked about in Iraq that funding of terrorists in Iraq that continues even through today, does it not?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you've heard reports that you could have, Iran has said they could act against Israel, and then so could other states in the Middle East, including Iraq. And so, look, as a veteran of that conflict.
Okay, so America owns Iraq, even now, and ISIS is an American asset, which I've well documented here before. I mean, these are just out and out lies, right?
It's definitely it leaves a bad taste in my mouth to see that country is basically a satellite of the Iranians, and you have the
So that's a consequence of he said he was there as a soldier, because like this twerp, right? But what you're saying is that war in Iraq, that illegal war that killed over 1 million Iraqis and took down Saddam Hussein, has led Iraq into being more friendly with Iran. So that's what he's saying here, right? Which doesn't make sense, because Iran is Shiite and Iraq is Sunni, and they had issue before. They had beef before. But if they're more friendly now, and Iran has more of an influence on Iraq, it's because we destabilized and took down the government there and left that place a mess.
Shia domination, and they've not been the type of partner that people envisioned back in the day. Another lesson learned with respect to national security. But yes, those Shia fighters, that was the reason why Qasem Soleimani was put out of his misery by the U.S. government. He had been directing attacks against Americans for years, and that was a justifiable response against him.
Again, these countries have all suffered from the hands of the American empire. I mean, they have. Like, you have to be fair about these things. I mean, you're not going to be. But you can't talk about these things that these other people are just evil. You can't just say, oh, they're evil. That's why they do what they do. What's their motivation? Oh, they're evil. Oh, yeah, well, has anything happened that has caused them to not like America and these other countries, Israel? No, they're just evil. Why, they just can't, accept their occupations. They can't just accept their, us tampering with their lives and doing things to them that they never did to us. And, they just can't accept it. They just can't accept us wrecking their countries and doing regime change and doing all kinds of things, economic sanctions and their kids starving and things. They just can't accept these things and how great we are. And so they're evil, right? That's the position of America and Israel here.
Yeah, I want to talk. You brought up the $6 billion, and that a lot of Republicans have been talking about. But as you said, as you implied, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that $6 billion is not what funded the operation, but oil revenues have been allowed over the past several years to continue to flow back into Iran. I'm wondering, you're running obviously against Donald Trump in the Republican primary. I'm wondering whether you think it was a mistake for President Trump to have waivers, the waivers that he pushed back in 2018 to allow China, to allow India, to allow Turkey, to allow South Korea, where the $6 billion came from, whether it was a mistake for him to grant those waivers to Iran, because, as he said at the time...
Think about the arrogance here, right? This is the programming you have as an American. That Iran, which was wrecked by America. So here it is, Operation Ajax, the Iran coup, 64 years later, the CIA releases details of the Iranian coup. For 64 years, the CIA denied this, but then they finally admitted to it. But they destroyed this guy. We know what happened here, right? Here is known as in Iran as the 28-day Mordad coup. Was the U.S. and the U.K. instigated Iranian army-led overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in favor of strengthening the monarchical rule of the Shah. Okay, and it was pretty greasy, right, what they did. Like, they went through there and they did manipulative behaviors and tried to, he was a very popular president. And it was all because of the Anglo-Iranian oil company, British Petroleum, that, they say it right here. It's all here, right? That he wanted 50% of the profits, 50% of the business, that British Petroleum had an 80-20 split, which is 50-50 was, fair. But they didn't want to be fair because they're an evil oil company. And somehow they had the bidding somehow they were able to make the CIA, this is the guy Mossadegh, right? And he was a democratically elected person. They were very modern there, right? They were, a modern country that was friendly to the West. They let an English company come in and mine their oil. And so they were being influenced by the West. People were going there and all these things. And they destroyed this guy. And they made up a bunch of things, locked him in prison when he did nothing wrong, turned the people against him. And then the Shah of Iran was a bloodthirsty murderer who abused his people and all these things. And Israel was completely in favor of this, right? And to say that Iran now can't have a nuclear weapon, even though evil empires who have done evil stuff like America and Russia and China and these other countries have nuclear weapons, Iran can't have one, deciding who can have one and who can't, right? Because the Iranian people are somehow evil when America has done all these evil things, right? And then say they can't run their businesses. They can't sell their oil to China and Russia and these places. And they blocked this money that's going to go to feed people in Iran and go into their economy. And then they're going to give this money back and say that's a mistake. It's their money, right? It's business that they did. They sold their oil to these countries and they blocked, Trump went in and blocked all these things with the deal they had before, which Israel loved. Israel loves when America punishes Iran. And Iran, was wrecked by the Americans.
he didn't want to basically upset the flow of oil and cause prices to go up. Was that a mistake?
Well, so first on the $6 billion, I do think that what Biden did was a mistake. I think doing that deal sent the wrong signal. I think the fact that Iran was expecting that money, yes, that money did not go fund this, but I do think money's fungible, and it gave them the ability to potentially shift money elsewhere. I would not relieve sanctions on Iran. I understand that there's a lot going on.
He's just so unlikable. Just his face, his voice. There's just something weaselly about him.
On with energy markets. One of the things I've been talking about in this campaign is expanding domestic energy production here at home. We have the greatest gas resources, tremendous oil resources. I know that cuts against what the Biden administration is trying to do with the Green New Deal.
So they came in and they were hoping he would crap all over Trump, and now he's crapping all over Biden.
Policies, but in terms of our national security, that benefits us at the expense of Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and China. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're having to make those decisions.
That waiver, right?
Look at her. Look at this evil MNFer. Look at this evil dude right here. This evil little dude.
In 2018, you wouldn't have supported a waiver.
I've always supported. I've always supported from the time I was a congressman now the strongest possible turning of the screws on Iran and their energy. My view.
Exactly, because we haven't hurt them enough. We haven't destroyed their country enough. We got to starve more of their children and all the rest of these things. And so they're trying to link Iran with this thing, which we already know, which of course links Russia to it. And, they're bringing DeSantis in there to kind of crap all over Trump, but he's also saying this stuff about Biden. Let's watch a little bit more of this, then there's another clip from him.
Is anything that goes to that regime, they are not trying to make life better for the Iranian people. They are going to use that, and they are going to try to fund terrorism with it. And I think that that's a lesson. But I will also say this.
It's a lesson. We should strip them of all monies and, try to provoke a war with them.
Donald Trump's approach to Iran was stronger than his predecessors was, and it's been stronger than the Biden was. I think both Obama and Biden thought you could have a rapprochement with them. I don't think that that's possible.
The editorial board of Israeli...
The Republicans are worse on this than the Democrats. It's what you just said. Because you have to be reasonable. Like, you can't abuse a country like we've abused Iran and all these other countries and screw the country up. Just doing stupid things. Like, we should know that regime change doesn't work. That we, did regime change in a number of countries, and every one of those countries became destabilized. It hurt the families and the children and the lifestyle of those places. It also sent a mass exodus. Like, all the countries we've destabilized in the Middle East has sent all these Muslims fleeing the country and going to Europe, which is a big problem for Europe. They have mass immigration of people who don't want to live in the countries that America and the West has wrecked. And that's caused all kinds of issues, right? And, you got to take some responsibility for doing something that is known to fail. Regime change has never worked and will never work. Even if the government is actually evil, taking down an evil government makes things worse immediately afterwards. An evil government is better than no government. And people say, well, governments suck. Yeah, of course they do, because people suck. But if you take down a government, it turns into thug rule, and all your services, or you say, all right, let's take down the American government. American government sucks. Somebody just erased the American government. You wouldn't have electricity like you do now. You wouldn't have, services. The roads would fall apart. It would be, nobody protecting you from thug rule and crime. And you just go to these countries after a bad leader is deposed, and it gets worse. Not that the leader was evil. Lots of times the leaders are evil because they're, politicians, and the government is evil. But it gets worse after taking it down. It's a known fact. And America keeps on taking these governments down, stabilizing these countries, and then causing problems and taking no responsibility for it, right? So let's see what he said on CNN here.
You do is, you want to help Israel? Let's just do it, and don't try to leverage other things. But that's how Congress operates. I'll let them do that. But I think we've had a long-standing security relationship with Israel. We've said that we would be there, and this is an hour that calls for strong support.
You were just talking about Florida. I want to talk about anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world. There was a peculiar statement from American white supremacist Nick Fuentes over the weekend, who said that Israel's intelligence failure, he called it, is, quote, a little suspicious in light of how the Likud government will benefit politically from this crisis, both domestically and internationally. What do you say to a statement like that?
That is totally outrageous. This garbage out there, you hear things, people are saying that the babies really somehow weren't killed, that this is all just manufactured. I understand there's conspiracy theories that can go on, but we've got to put that garbage aside, and we've got to stand with Israel. And yes, we have to condemn the anti-Semitism that has motivated these attacks and that has motivated attacks around the world.
Let me just ask you then, on Nick Fuentes for a second. He ate at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump in 2022. He's also said, among other things, I love Hitler. A guy like that who spreads conspiracy theories like the one you were just talking about. How do you feel about Republicans associating with him?
So I turned the TV on at breakfast today, and this is what was going on. This anti-conspiracy theorist idea, right? These anti-conspiracy theories about how this official story couldn't be wrong, or could be wrong, or was completely wrong. This guy who, Berman, I think his name is something Berman, and he used to be on the morning show before they replaced him with Don Lemons and Poppy Harlow, and now I guess he's back on the morning show. And maybe Len Berman, I'm not sure, whatever. But he is he's a Jewish person, right? And they're both slamming conspiracy theorists here and linking them to these idea of white supremacy and all these other things. Anybody questioning the official story is a hateful person. That's the thing that they've been trying to do, especially at CNN, but everywhere.
Well, I reject all conspiracy theories of that nature. I think that we just have so much garbage in our society right now. I mean, it broke my heart to see those demonstrators. It breaks my heart to see college students putting out praise of Hamas, all across the board. I mean, I think we just have to stand up together and do what's right. And so, yeah, look, I'm proud of what we've done in Florida. We've signed major legislation to combat anti-Semitism. We've provided security assistance for our Jewish day schools, and we've beefed up Holocaust education because it's important that we never forget. So we've led by example here with our deeds. And I think that's part of the reason why we have such a strong community here.
All right. You didn't answer my question on Nick Fuentes. I'll move on if you're not going to give a direct answer. Are you going to give a direct answer to that?
Honestly, you were kind of garbled about Mar-a-Lago. I mean, someone was saying something bad. Obviously, my record speaks for itself.
I just want to know if Republicans should be eating with Nick Fuentes.
I would not do that.
Okay, thank you.
See, the Republicans are much worse on the issue of Israel and Palestine than the Democrats and Iran and the rest of us. There's one more thing on Iran here. I mean, this is just, the pandering here and anti-conspiracy theorists. You can't trust the governments. The governments lie all the time. And so you're not a hateful person or a bad person for questioning liars, right? Like, that's what they're saying. If you call liars liars, or you question if a liar, organizations that perpetually lie to you, if you question them, you're a bad person. You're evil. That's their, that's their MO. And DeSantis is going along with this. I mean, he's kind of worse than Trump and these other guys because he's just unlikable on top of it. But then I turned the TV back on. I don't know when it was. I guess maybe for lunch. I don't know. And this was being said.
And they were survivors. They were survivors of the Second World War. We don't need to kind of say more when you have those points of reference.
Yeah, Nick Robertson, thank you.
So the ticker says Israeli government babies and toddlers found decapitated. Now, I'm going to show you Beatty in a moment. Some of the lies, like what he said, it's kind of unconscionable. It's an old clip, but one of my viewers sent it to me. It's kind of the centerpiece of what this whole thing's about here. But remember the time that this girl got up from, I guess, Iraq, and she was a diplomat's daughter, but they concealed it, that this woman was somebody who wanted America to invade Iraq during the first Gulf War under George W.H. Bush, right, the oldest, senior Bush. And it turned out she was a shill. And what she said was a lie. And she said that they were throwing babies out of incubators. They were taking the incubators and throwing the babies out of them, remember? And it became something that was a complete sham. But if you want to convince people that another group is evil, then this is the kind of thing that you do. And this is what this is. I'm going to talk about the evil part at the end.
We'll come back to you shortly. I want to bring in CNN's Alex Marquardt right now. Alex, we are learning new details from U.S. intelligence about when and what Iran knew or may have known about the terror attacks on Israel. What have you learned from sources? What are you hearing from the government?
Well, Anderson, there's no question that Iran bears major responsibility here. The administration still sticking to their line that Iran is broadly complicit in this attack because of the years of funding, of training, of material support. But what we're hearing from U.S. intelligence sources and people familiar with the intelligence is that for now, there is still no smoking gun that directly connects Iran to the execution, to the planning, to the approval of this attack. Certainly, they are complicit because of the support that they have given to Hamas over the years. But for now, and they're still going through the intelligence, there is no direct tie. In fact, we're told by U.S. intelligence officials that Iranian officials expressed some surprise at this attack. Now, Anderson, that surprise may come around the timing of it. I spoke with a senior Israeli official who said that he really doubts that Iran was not aware of this plot. Another senior Israeli official spoke with our colleague Matthew Chance just recently, saying that Iran effectively gave the green light for this operation, that they might not have been aware of the timing, but they're certainly aware of this Hamas operation. Again, both Israeli and American intelligence communities now, as is protocol, going back and combing through any evidence that they may have looked over to see if there's a more direct connection between Iran and these attacks over the weekend.
We've already established in my other 3 videos that who benefits from this is Israel. Israel gets lots of power. They get victim power. They get the power of being victims, and they get to grab land and grab power and do whatever they're going to do now in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Israel now has called up all their troops, something that they want to do for a while. They're occupying lands. I'll show you in a moment. They're turning off the power and the water and things to the people there, the people at Gaza Strip. And so if their number one thing that they say, this is the talking point, the tagline that's used by so many American politicians and people in Israel as well. Israel gets to defend itself. That Jewish people have lived in various countries around the world where they suffer anti-Semitic attacks. Even in America, where they are doing better than other places, but historically, they didn't have a homeland. They didn't have a place where they could be themselves, where they weren't going to be some minority population that has a bad reputation and gets a lot of hate. And so that's the reason for the formation of Israel, that they would have a place to call home where they could live in a non-bullying type situation, non-abusive situation. And unfortunately for them, that land is surrounded by people that don't like them. In all their borders, all the countries that are around that area that don't like them, more so than any other groups of people. Now, this is an age-old conflict that's biblical. Again, I talked about it yesterday in the other video or whatever it was. So there was this king, Abraham, was a Jewish king, and he had a wife, Sarah. She couldn't conceive a baby and an heir, so she allowed her slave girl, Hagar, she allowed her husband to bang the slave girl because, he could do that. She was just, a slave girl, so why would she care? I mean, she didn't have any rights, right? And again, the Old Testament sucks, because she's basically R-ing this slave girl because she has no ability to say no. And Hagar had a son named Ishmael, and then I guess he was 99 years old, and then God decided to allow Sarah to have a kid, because that's what God did. He just liked to f with people and cause problems, and so he allowed Sarah to conceive a baby that was Isaac, who became like the father of the Jewish people in a sense, and then Hagar and Ishmael became the Arabs, and this conflict has been there ever since, right? My wife just came in and I told her the story because I read it yesterday, but I just got a better version of it. I just read, and I told her a story, and she said, "Was the slave girl underage?" Like they are with Thomas Jefferson or whatever. But Ishmael was the rightful heir because he was firstborn, all that stuff, and so they've had this biblical conflict, right? And so there's no bigger haters of Jewish people than in the Muslim community, and there's hatred between them. And so if your primary goal is to have a land to defend yourself, and then you have these little pockets of land in the Gaza Strip and other places where foreign governments can give your enemies or give people there, disgruntled Palestinian people who had their lands taken from them, supply them with rockets and things, and give them a vantage point for attacking you if any of these countries decide to attack you someday. And it's not a good thing, right? Like it would be having, we already kind of have that because Chinese government or Chinese companies own land in America. But imagine if, these enemies of America had big pockets of land where they could, like Russia, could put nuclear missiles in America. That was the whole thing with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So Israel can't defend itself as long as there's Palestinian land in their land, right? Like this totally makes sense as a strategy that they have to get rid of the Palestinian land. They have to be able to control that to secure their borders, to secure from being attacked. And they need something really bad, like, decapitating babies and atrocities to say, look, we're going in there to finally grab this land. To get the land grabbed, this is what they have to do. This is what they need. So who benefits? Certainly not the Palestinian people from this attack. Doesn't help the Palestinian people. Doesn't help anybody but Israel. And I guess America, whatever, America's goals are here. But it certainly helps Israel more than any other group of people. It doesn't, it hurts the Palestinian. It's actually going to cause them much more suffering, and they're going to lose what little they have there. And so if you look at who benefits and, this idea that you don't do something when you know you're going to get an ass kicking for doing it. And the Palestinians and Hamas have gotten many ass kickings. Hamas is going to have to be disappeared. They're going to have to dismantle Hamas, kill all of the, it's going to have to be whatever. So if you look at it that way, then you wonder who has the motivation for doing it. Like that's just logic, right? And then the idea that this is a false flag becomes a more believable scenario. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's believable. And if it is a false flag, then part of it is to get rid of these lands that are get rid of Palestine. But the other part is to get rid of Iran, which is a neighbor. Like if, again, their primary goal is to defend Israel, and you have this powerful army, powerful country in Iran next to it. Iran is sort of the crown jewel there. And they can link Iran, which they always do, to Hamas. And it's always going to be Israel's goal to get rid of Iran. They're always going to want that. That's where they consider their biggest threat. And again, they're being threatened is what what they want to get rid of. And so then some of this has to be about provoking war with Iran. And they don't want to fight Iran by itself, so they want America to get involved, and then Russia's going to get involved, and then kaboom. Okay, so this is just headlines. Israeli says fighting will intensify. This is a front page from MSNBC. Gaza's sole power plant shuts down, and all this other stuff, right? White House preparing to submit supplemental funding request to Congress for aid to Israel and to Ukraine. Right now we're sponsoring two wars, the same way that they claim that Iran is doing, right? It's okay for us to do it, but not Iran. Basic services in Gaza will be halted electric company says. That means there's going to be no water, right? There's going to be no water. There's going to be no food. These types of things there. Okay, so one more thing here, and I would have led with this, but this is the way it came in. I'd done the rest of the video, and one of my viewers sent me this. And I just sent it to my wife, and she just messaged me back, OMG. Because this guy just said OMG here. He just did an OMG.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews.
What?
And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. He said, burn them.
Okay, so Netanyahu, this is from Insider, said that, you just heard it, and that Hitler wasn't really, there's actually one of those things I'll show you in a minute, blamed Hajjad Amin al-Sunni for convincing Hitler to kill the Jews in Germany. And it says here, al-Husseini was a Muslim leader in the early 20th century. So this is a guy here. He was Palestinian, was a Palestinian Arab nationalist and Muslim leader in mandatory Palestine. So he was somebody who lived in Jerusalem, and he was a Palestinian. So Netanyahu just blamed the Holocaust on a Palestinian. Right, that Hitler wasn't such a bad guy after all. He just wanted to expel the Jews. But this guy didn't want them all going to Palestine, so he told Hitler what to do with them, which was burn them, according to the president of Israel, prime minister of Israel. And he has been on for a long time. And, there it is, right? It's Palestine's fault. Like, we kind of knew it was Palestine's fault all along. It's the Palestinians that were the evil, not Hitler. Okay, I have a little different take on this. I want to get into the Old Testament, the Bible, for a moment in a bit, and then just wrap this up with Beatty, with this guy, right? Netanyahu. So the whole victim consciousness thing that Jewish people have, and I've used it a lot, right? In terms to justify their actions and attitudes towards being, targeted people, being a people who are being targeted by Christians and Muslims and God knows who else. Its centerpiece is around Hitler and Nazi Germany and their treatment in the Holocaust, right? That's the centerpiece of the victim consciousness. And Netanyahu just blew that up and said it had nothing to do with Hitler, like Hitler ended up doing these things, but he was told to do these things by this Palestinian leader, which to some extent lets Hitler off the hook a little bit, right? And, come on, right? Like, what are you doing here? Like, why would you do that? It's just how much they want to get rid of the Palestinians. Because like I said, if your primary goal is to live in a situation where you're free from your enemies and you're not being abused, you shouldn't have chose the land there because it's the worst land. My wife and I were talking about this because I just learned it. I had heard about it before and I sort of remembered it, but vaguely. The stuff to do with Sarah and Hagar. When I grew up, there was a cartoon named Hagar the Horrible, and it was spelled the same way. Hagar was a Viking, and it was Hagar the Horrible, which is demeaning to the Muslim people, right? The cartoon has driven some controversy because I just looked it up within the Muslim community because, they're using a name here. And I don't think that's accidental, right? But my wife and I were talking about, I always talk about the Old Testament and, the Jewish Bible and how God was portrayed in that book. And so, as well as that story, eventually Abraham, who had his first baby from Sarah, God knows how old she was, when he was 99 years old. And after that, God said, all right, you finally have an heir, go kill him. You got to bring him up and sacrifice him to me. And so God ordered him to sacrifice his own son. He went up to the mountain, built an altar. And God said, well, I just was testing you, so you don't have to kill your son, but you built an altar, and, I need blood sacrifices because that's how I roll, because I'm God, and that's, how God is. And so he provided a sheep for Like he made a sheep so Abraham could kill the sheep and sacrifice it to him, a lamb or whatever. The blood sacrifices that are in the Bible. And so you can derive from this that God was, then Abraham became a sort of chosen one guy to start the religion that's now Judaism. And of course, Isaac was important to this, all these other people. So God was okay with slavery. In fact, he was the one who suggested this idea that Sarah give her Arab slave girl, probably a young girl, probably underage, to Abraham to have an heir. And then after that, this guy grew up, Ishmael grew up with this idea that he was going to be the heir to his father Abraham, but it turns out he was just a slave girl's son, and God reversed that later on in his life. Of course, Ishmael probably wasn't too happy about that. Neither was his slave girl wife, slave girl mother. It's kind of a dick move on God's part. He was okay with all that, which created the conflict, the ultimate conflict between what became the Muslim people and the Jewish people, right? This was the start of the conflict. He had no problem with Abraham having two wives, or Abraham sacrificing his own son, being willing to kill his own son because some voice in his head told him to do it, right? And so, this is the way God's presented in the Old Testament. It's not God. That's not how God is. God doesn't need you to sacrifice anything to him. God doesn't want you to kill anything, and there's no tests. You just have to be willing to serve and follow God and do it on a regular basis. It's not so much the tests that are important. It's the consistency. It's the willing to be consistently service-oriented and willing to connect with God and your soul on an internal level and be guided from within and get better and better at that as you move forward in your life of service to God. That's all that's necessary. And the service is not mandatory, or it doesn't come from threats or, any type of pressure. It has to come from your heart, and a loving heart who just wants to serve God because God loves you so much. You love God so much, and God is love, and you just want to serve God because of your gratitude. It's the right thing to do. Like that's why the Bible sucks. The Old Testament, because it's the way it presents God is horrible. But going back to the central point, you have a group of people who have had beef with these other people. And in the Bible, there's a period of time where, this is the part that I remember when my ex read this to my kids in homeschooling, and I was pretty stunned by the level of violence. And I started to do a little research on it. And when Moses had his exodus from being slaves to the Egyptians, and they were going around the desert, and God ultimately punishes Moses because, Moses did everything God wanted, but it wasn't enough for God. And so he never lets Moses find the promised land. They're just wandering around looking for the promised land, and they never find it because, Moses did something to piss God off. It was something slight, like something, petty, right? But, God's a real dick in the Bible, and so that's what happened. And God is ordering Moses to destroy all these different peoples, undermanned, people with not as good a military. And they're going around and destroying all these Arab peoples, like the Canaanites and the Philistines, I don't know, all these different people. Like I can't remember their names, but it happens all the time. Like it's happening where he's ordering them to take down this kingdom, kill these people. It's pretty brutal. Of course, I talked about this recently where David wanted to marry the king's daughter, and the king said, okay, go bring me 100 foreskins of my enemies, like the Canaanites or all these groups of people. And David said, I won't bring you 100, I'll bring you 200. And they went and slaughtered these people and cut off their foreskins because, they're weird like that, right? A lot of weird stuff here. But, there's atrocities and war crimes, that are documented in the Bible. It's talked about. And they justify it because God told them to do it. And you can justify anything saying God told you to do something. You can always say, oh, yeah, God promised me this, or God said this, and justify it. But other people don't subscribe to your belief and don't have to go along with it. And they have their own personal relationship with God, and they're God's children as well. Because of this prophecy of a promised land, which is in the worst possible place for Israel. It's surrounded by enemies. They have to do a lot to, and they're kind of paranoid by this, and they have to do a lot to protect themselves, defend themselves, as they call it, right? They're just there trying to defend themselves. And ultimately, that's the end of Iran and these other countries. They have to either sign some sort of peace agreements. They have the backing of America, who's the big bully out there. And ultimately, Iran has to go. Like, it just has to go. And certainly, Palestine has to go as well. There's no other way to look at it. If I was them, that's what I would feel like, right? If you were them, that's how you would feel if you were in that country. I mean, there are a lot of Jewish people who are appalled by what's going on, and they post things on social media. There's whole groups of Jewish people in Israel and outside Israel that are against the maltreatment of the Palestinians, but this is inevitable, right? And I talk about this in a different way than other people. Like, I want to get down to the idea of evil, because that's what this is all about. The Muslims believe that the Jews are evil, the Jews believe the Muslims are evil. It's not everybody, but there's some, and many of them are leaders in these countries, right? And, it goes beyond that. Like, it's political parties, and when you believe that your enemy is evil, you can justify anything in terms of your behavior towards them, and we've established that, right? Like, everybody knows that. The problem with it is, I define evil as going against the will of God, which is demonic, right? To do your own thing, your egotistical decisions, which everybody does. Everybody does evil in their life, where you choose something that hurts your soul and goes against what God wants you to do, what the divinity in you wants to do. You have the freedom of choice, and oftentimes people choose evil. And some evils are, of course, worse than others. And some evil is, it goes far beyond, like, it's a long-lasting set of decisions. It's a path in which a person plots a course of more and more evil decisions, and it just gets worse. And so some people are more evil than others. Some people are good some of the time. They're aligned with God some of the time, and sometimes they're not. Like, that's most of us. Most people are like that. Not most people, but some people are like that. They're connected to God, and they're making decisions based on their connection with God and their understanding of divine, not forcing their opinions on other people, but making personal decisions with their relationship with God and the divinity within them as part of it. But, people stray from the path, and that's all, whatever it is. But in terms of all of us collectively, we have a system, a demonic economic system, and then all the other aspects of it that is evil, that is, an abomination, that goes against the divine order of things, goes against the divine laws and rules. And so it's evil that we all benefit from and are dependent on. And I've talked about that. And America has to do evil things, just like every country that's in power has to do evil things to keep itself going. Because if you let nature run its course, America would have collapsed a long time ago. The economy would have collapsed a long time ago. If you allow the divine forces to do what they're supposed to do, there would be corrections all over the place, bringing this back to a more divine state of being, which is what God always wants, to bring it back to its purest form. And what we have is a very gross demonic economic system and culture and way of life and all the immorality that goes with it. And you see it all over the place. And it's not just blatant devil worship that people in the Christian community get so obsessed with. It's things that they do personally, things that they endorse personally. It's things that go against God's will, and our ego-based decisions go with the ego over the soul. And in that way, we all contribute to the evil. We're all a part of it. We're all, participating in it in one degree or another. And some are worse than others, of course, but that really doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if you're only in it partially. I mean, it's better than being, totally embracing it. But you don't get points on the spiritual level for looking at evil in other people and talking about how evil they are, right? And, in a way where you think you're great and they're evil. Like, that doesn't work. You have to always remember that you're a participant in this evil system, and that, evil is what keeps it going. It's fueled by evil. It's fueled by ego-based anti-God decisions, and we're all part of that, right? And even if you don't want to go along with it, you kind of have to some degree. You have to participate just based in your own personal survival. And I personally have reconciled that to my best of my ability, something where, this is the cards, the hand that we've been dealt. But then you have to just say, all right, well, when the system goes, it's for the best. and it'll suck for us. So, we've all been habituated to it. We've all been trained to this system, and changing and doing something different would be really hard for most of us, maybe all of us to some extent or the other. But when it happens, it's for the best. And then just, do our best to work for God during this period of time. Do our best to provide some sort of service. And, for me, it's the videos and, doing the gratefulness meditation, making that available to people. And, it's not much, but it's something, right? It's the best that I can provide and the best that I can contribute. And, of course, talking about this in a different way, a different perspective. That's why I don't get all fire and brimstone when I see these things going on and the lies and the atrocities and all these things. And, we all see it. But it's just what's going to happen until the system eats itself, like the system is in the process of destroying itself. And the people that are going along with it, who are, making the destruction happen, even though they think they're doing the opposite, well, in a way, they're doing God's will. They're certainly doing God's will unintentionally. And as a person seeking the truth, you got to realize that everything has to go. And your belief in your religion, not your belief in God, but your belief in the organizations itself and some of the teachings, it's a part of it. Like these teachings are not, they don't present God in a way that's going to help you connect to God and understand the true nature of God, because they've been manipulated to be ego-based demonic religions that are, there to control people and to use God as a weapon to make their egotistical, to give them like some sort of validation to their egotistical decisions, right? When you want to do something wrong and you say, oh, God said I could do it, or God told me to do it, well, then you excuse yourself from the evil, and then people are like, well, I guess God told him to do it, and either they believe you or not, but he gives you validation, gives you some authority. And that's a lot of what's happening here. And, it's not good for anyone. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.